For those of you who don't know Jeff, he's an amazing human being and epitomizes what living a civil life is, the way he gives back and takes care of people. So, Jeff, thank you for everything you do in the village. It's truly appreciated. I guess we could give him another round of applause. I don't know. How many of you have shopped in Cynthia Compton's bookstore in the village, MacArthur's? Okay, if you haven't, I'm telling you, you're missing out. You need to head there. So the books tonight are provided by Cynthia. Unfortunately, she had to be out of town, so I'm the B team. I'm not the A team, so I'm filling in for Cynthia. I had a very nice man say to me, "Are you Cynthia?" And I was like, "Well, I'm the fill-in Cynthia." So if you're interested in purchasing a book, please stop at the table after you listen to Jeff and Lexi speak. I will tell you the book is amazing. I think you will all rush to purchase it. After they speak, Lexi will be sitting in the back with me signing the book, which is even an added bonus because then you get to speak with her again. So that would be ideal. Also, if you did not sign up when you walked in, we're taking your email information so that you stay on the list and we keep you abreast of everything that Jeff is doing. Because as you all know, Jeff Worrell is everywhere, right? So without further ado, I would love to have Jeff come up and take the stage. When we talk about civil people, I always say that right here, this is the guy that lives it every day and has been living it for decades. So Jeff, thank you so much for all you do. He's a great partner to the city of Carmel. He's a great partner to the Carmel Clay Public Library. I would be up the creek without you. So please never stop coming to the library. We love you. We need you. And thank you for all you do. And this program tonight, I know, will be amazing. So, Jeff, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good. Oh, thank you, Liz. Thank you. That's so nice. Liz Hamilton, she runs the Carmel Clay Library Foundation. She runs it. Actually, her trains are always on time. My train was a little off tonight. But let's give her a big round of applause because she's amazing. And the foundation is helping us to sell some books tonight. So, welcome. Welcome to our second event to celebrate our effort to grow a culture of civility in Carmel. And I must tell you that I am already feeling it in so many different ways because my email box is so full of wonderful, wonderful ideas and things that people would like to do that I am now at the point that we are going to have to reach out to you in order to help us execute all the excellent ideas. But let me just share with you a couple of things that are going on before we bring up our guest tonight, who actually is, she's just part of the family now. So, you know, this is going to be a very, very casual night tonight, but a couple things, really cool things that have happened. All of you should have received, and if you didn't, we'll get them passed out, but a sheet. Can I borrow this sheet and just hold it up real quick? A sheet that looks like this. This right now is called the Carmel Public Office Voter Civility Code. Now, this is an effort. I'm going to tell you a story about it later, but this is an effort in order to, as a community, to describe what we want from people who are seeking our vote. And I know we have some candidates in the room. There's a whole story of how we got here. I'm going to share that with you after Lexi talks. But I'd like you to review it because part of the way we're going to work together is that you're going to tell me if you can support it, if you can't, if you will share it, spread it, etc. So we'll work on that in just a minute. But I want to make sure everybody had it so that you can take a look at it. Our arts organizations, I was invited to speak about civility before a show at Civic Theater because they feel so strongly about civility that they wanted their audience to know what we're trying to do in Carmel. We then agreed that we are going to talk to the cast and crew before every show. Welcome to Carmel. So many people that are at Civic Theater that perform or work for Civic come from central Indiana, Fishers, Indianapolis, all over central Indiana. And so we want them to know in Carmel, this is what we expect. And this is how we're going to treat you. And this is how we would ask you to treat each other. That to me was just going to the nth degree. churches are now, and I don't know if any of you have heard them yet, but churches are now starting to include a prayer for our community, a civility prayer. So if you haven't heard it yet, we're getting going, but I could use some more helpers to get that word out there. And then, got to check my notes. And then there are just so many ideas. I want to bring forward Beverly Randolph Fernandez. And if she could I just want to introduce you to Beverly, because Beverly has stepped up and agreed to take over the administration of Carmel Civility Project. So before we scare her off, would you give her a big round of applause? So Beverly comes highly qualified, because what I'm discovering is this is it is a full-time job on its own. So you will hear more from us. The next thing that I'll remind you about is that we are going to do a focus group on March 21st. We will have them throughout the day. I have a professional facilitator that is donating their time. And that's where we can, if you have March 21st, the ability to join us, morning, afternoon, and evening times will be available. We'll email you that. Then you can help us to decide what's important to do and what's less important, how you want to go forward, etc. So hopefully you can participate in that. And let's see, I think those are all my housekeeping things. And I have begged an organization to do a website for us that I'd hoped to be able to announce it tonight, but I didn't like some of the branding that they came up with. So we're working on that, but something that we could then share with other communities. So we're looking for kind of a global branding opportunity, and that we can then share that with other communities, because I believe that is Lexi's dream, is that this would go further into other communities. And I will tell you that on next Wednesday, March 13th, I'll be moderating Fisher's talk with Alexandra. So that's really exciting. They're launching their big one next Wednesday. So if you can't get enough Alexia, you can go over there and hear that one too. So much going on. I believe those are all the things that I wanted to make sure. So how is tonight going to go? Lexi I have given Lexi kind of a topic that I get a lot of comments from people who think that, uncivil behavior just popped onto the radar yesterday, or because of our environment and where we are. So Lexi's going to open us up by giving a little bit of her insights about that, and then really want to dig into questions and answers, some practical things that you can do to take home with you, and we will work on that. And then obviously we're going to work on the civility code, which is something I want to make sure we do right after Lexi talks, so I don't forget about it. But I know you're here. I'm grateful that you came. We have a lot of people on live stream, so I am grateful that this is our core group. You guys are the hardcore, back for another dose. Appreciate seeing so many familiar faces. Will you please give Lexi, our leader and the person behind the concepts that we're following, the most gracious and loving, warm welcome that you can. Lexi Hudson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff. And hi, everyone. It's great. I put this right here for a minute. It's so much fun to be back in Carmel. This is, I tell everyone that it's funny that I'm here because I live in Indianapolis, and when I first moved to Indiana from Washington D.C., I took a job in the governor's office. I was in state government, and I realized that and what I did was to get situated in Indiana and state government. I realized that every single state employee in Indiana has an alter ego on the show called Parks and Rec. Raise your hand if you've heard Parks and Rec. And what's funny is, I watched I've been watching the entire season. Michael Schur, he's the same creator who created The Office and Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He's just like and The Good Place. I don't know if anyone saw The Good Place. Just a genius of a creator of our day. And so Parks and Rec is just hysterical and so much fun. So I binge watch it all. And I joked that it's funny that I'm here, that I get such a warm welcome from Carmel, because this is like the Eagleton to the Pawnee that is Indianapolis, right? Like I can't get my roads paved, and then I come all the way up here and it's like beautiful. This building's magnificent. It's palatial. Like it's just a privilege to be here. So thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Jeff. Where is Jeff? Where did he go? Thank you so much for having this vision. Thanks for just picking up my book and saying, how can we embody this here? How can we instantiate your ideas? And to all of you, raise your hand if you were at our last event a few weeks ago. I love that. And thank you for coming back, for continuing to be part of this conversation. Thanks to the new faces who are here, who want to continue the dialogue and dig deeper about how we can embody a respect for personhood and human dignity, which is what we need more than ever at these deeply divided times. In times of war, when the stakes are high, in times of high stakes elections, where it feels existential, that's actually when we need civility and to stay mindful of the personhood and dignity of the other most. So it's so important that you're here. And I'm so grateful to be with you here this evening. So Jeff made sure, he said, you have different things to say tonight, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, I wrote 10 million words related to this book. I'm not even joking you. And only 80,000 of them made them into the book. And I have lots to say on this topic. So I'll share with you a little bit of my story for the new people that are here. And then I'll share with you about like the timelessness of this problem, timelessness of the solution. And then I'd like to talk with you about hospitality, a really practical way that I think we can embody these values of civility, of recovering dialogue and a sense of our common humanity across deep differences. And then I'd love to dig down with Jeff, looking forward to the conversation about making it practical for you and your everyday and in our neighborhoods and our community here in Carmel. So I came to my interest in this topic, honestly. My mother's called Judy the Manners Lady, and she's one of 4 women, actually, who are internationally renowned experts on manners and etiquette, named Judy. There are 4 of them. And it was very funny that my mom was actually here last time we were at the event at the Carmel Library. And by the way, thanks to Liz for being here and for supporting books. And we miss Cynthia tonight. I think she's under the weather as well. So I came to my interest in this. Honestly, I always questioned the norms and expectations that my mother expected my brothers and I to comply with. She would teach us how to shake our hands, just so, like tight squeeze, look someone in the eye, how to set the table, forks here, knives here. And I asked what every, self-assured 5-year-old would ask, like, why? Why do we do things? But it was like a deeper kind of philosophical hunger, like, why do we do things the way we do them? And my mother would be like, just get this done, just set the table as I'm asking you to do. So I always I hungered for that, like kind of moral and philosophical underpinning and justification for the why behind why we do things the way that we do them. Is it just because some self-appointed Judy of another era, some Judy of a bygone era decided that we should? And if so, is that a sufficient reason to continue to just blindly follow norms and rules and expectations? I hunger for that moral underpinning. But I generally followed the rules and expectations she asked me to follow, because she promised they would lead to success in work and school and life. And she was right, until I found myself in federal government. I served in Washington, D.C. during a very toxic, very divided time in our world and our nation, 2017 to 2018. And I call it my year of service. It was like years off my life being there. And it was this environment of anti-human flourishing, like all of these common decencies and niceties. I had a lot of confidence in my ability to get on with people. I had a lot of confidence in the rules of politeness and etiquette to help me overcome differences, soften the rougher edges of life together, and do life together, even when we disagreed. And what I experienced in government made me question everything about myself and my confidence and the rules and helping me flourish and get along with others across difference. People saw me and were quick to essentialize who I was based on one aspect of what they knew about me. And I was shouted down at meetings. I was chased out of meeting down the hallway, and I was berated. I was cursed at, and all because that people thought they knew who I was, and they did it. So I was in this environment that was, deeply depersonalized. I felt essentialized. I felt dehumanized by one aspect of who I was. And when I left government, I thought deeply about, these big questions in life. What does it mean to be a human being? What is the bare minimum of respect that we are owed and owe to others by virtue of our common humanity? And what does that look like in practice, even in our deeply divided time, like what we're living in right now, and even when the stakes feel really high, when they feel existential? And that was kind of the moral foundation, the kind of answer to the question of why that I started from in exploring this topic of civility in a kind of more focused and deep way. Just so to some extent, my book is the product of a lifetime of work and thought about the good life and the timeless principles of human flourishing and the rules that and norms that facilitate the good life with others. But it was the immediate impetus for the book was being in this environment in government in DC that I think was a microcosm of the deep divisions in our country as a whole right now. And being this environment, again, of absent the basic necessities of life, let alone thriving, galvanized me. It was the immediate impetus for me to write the book that many of you now have in your hands or have at home and have read. And it was actually while I was in the last several months that I was in government, November of 2017, I took at the invitation of a think tank in DC called the Aspen Institute, I went on a retreat with other congressional staffers, some political appointees, people at think tanks from across the political spectrum. And it was a timely topic for the moment and for my intellectual interests. It was the topic of civility in modern American life. And what was really interesting at Aspen, it was at Wye River, which is on the eastern shore of Maryland, and it was just such all of it was a reprieve, like from the environment itself. Like I had lived a year in my life in a windowless office, and I was asked not to think, not to question, just to be a body in a chair and take home my paycheck, fill out my timesheet, and go home. And then to be out of that and in this beautiful, like natural environment, a babbling brook and crisp air and leaves falling in November. It was just really, really vibrant, beautiful, refreshing. But also refreshing was a sort of relational dynamic between me and the people I was there with. We are from all across the political spectrum. We weren't there kind of all in unison agreeing about the same thing. And so we deeply disagreed on the questions we were talking about, like, what is civility even? Can it be civil to protest? America's founded on protest. Can that ever be civil? Can civil disobedience be civil? And, and again, what is civility necessary for democracy? And we different visions of that. And even though we deeply disagreed, it never devolved past the level of respectful dialogue. We had too much fun together. We had a basic affection. We liked each other too much to let our differences cloud how we interacted and affect how we interact. And that was so refreshing. Again, just to feel like I was seen in the fullness of who I was, not just the difference, because the difference was what was accentuated and defined my time while I was in government. So, the beautiful scenery, the intellectual environment, all of that was really just a vibrant, fertile ground for thought and reflection. And it was actually while I was reading Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail that I had just several epiphanies about civility and about human dignity, and that became central to my philosophy of civility. And I had read this before in high school and college. Like, it's this classic work that everyone should revisit time and time again. And that's the beauty of a classic. You revisit it at different seasons of your life, and you bring new experiences, who you are, how you change, and what you're thinking, and what's on your mind to it. And it teaches you. It continues to teach you and instruct you. That's the beauty of the great conversation, this iterative dialogue across time and place by thoughtful people about questions of origin, purpose, and destiny that Dr. King was intimately involved in, that great conversation. He references Aristotle, he references Augustine, he references Socrates, like he references Martin Buber. He's in dialogue with all the greats that have come before, and debates with them too. And so that's what's beautiful about being in dialogue, being in the presence of eternal ideas and eternal works of art like Dr. King's letter. And I had several epiphanies. First was that, Dr. King is excoriating what he calls, and everyone knows this story, right? He's writing this from Birmingham jail after he's been in prison for protesting against racism and racial segregation in our country, these Jim Crow laws. And it's really amazing. I had the privilege of just a few weeks ago, I was invited to the Alabama Supreme Court to speak to a room of educators and jurists and lawyers. And I got to talk about just what I'm about to tell you, right next door to Dr. King's church on Dexter Avenue, where he preached about civil disobedience. And I was a stone's throw away from the street corner on Dexter Avenue in Montgomery, where Rosa Parks was asked to get off the bus for refusing to sit at the back of the bus in accordance with Chapter 6, Section 11 of Montgomery's code, which said that African Americans had to, show deference and give their seat away to a white person that came on the bus. And she was subsequently arrested. And there's a statue of her right there. So it was amazing to be talking about these ideas while inhabiting literally the air, the geography where these things actually happened. It was just beautiful and vibrant and incredible. And to embody and instantiate their very legacy in that way. And so I realized several things from Dr. King. He's excoriating the white moderate who's telling him, don't protest, don't speak up, don't ruffle any feathers when it comes to racial segregation and the systemic injustices in our country. Just be patient, they're saying, and it'll happen eventually. And Dr. King says no. The time for justice is now. And I realized that he was embodying this tradition of civility, and he was critiquing this tradition of politeness. And so Dr. King clarified for me this essential distinction between civility and politeness, which is an idea I unpack throughout my book. That I realized this while I was in government, that politeness is etiquette, it's technique. It's smoothing over differences. It's polishing over difference. And this is what the etymology of the word politeness actually suggests. It comes from the Latin root polere, which means to smooth or to polish, which gives a visual of what it actually does. It's superficial, external, it's technique, and it smooths over, sweeps difference under the rug, as opposed to giving us the tools to grapple with difference head on. Whereas the Latin root of civility is civitas, which is the etymological root of our words citizen, citizenship, city, and even civilization. And that's what civility is. It's the tools, the modes, the conducts, the character befitting a citizen in the city. That sometimes requires truth-telling. It requires confronting society with uncomfortable truth. There's a reason that Dr. King references Socrates, the gadfly, who was forced to commit suicide in his democratic Athens. He was voted off the island by his peers for confronting them with ugly injustices and the things about their society that they didn't like to hear. And they forced him to commit suicide. And so that there is this vibrant, this rich tradition of civil disobedience, of speaking truth to power as part of the democratic tradition that he's embodying and carrying on. So Dr. King clarified for me this essential distinction between civility and politeness, that sometimes it's a duty of citizenship to have difficult conversations, to disagree, to even make someone uncomfortable. I mean, it wasn't comfortable for the white moderates to be called, to be criticized. It wasn't comfortable for the people who supported the Jim Crow racist status quo to be protested. To be the recipients of the sit-ins in the letter writing camp. That wasn't comfortable to be called a hypocrite and a racist and to be confronted with that. But Dr. King, he knew that was a way to respect his fellow citizens, actually. And for anyone who wanted to be part of his peaceful nonviolence resistance movement, he had them undergo this process that he called purification, which is essentially cultivating the disposition of civility. Cultivating a disposition of fundamental love and respect for our fellow citizens. And that is what compelled them and informed their protest. First, cultivating that love and respect, and that informed the protest. It demanded it to say, I respect you enough to show you that you have an inaccurate view of the world. And I'm gonna show you that. We're gonna have a conversation about this. And so, Dr. King revealed this difference between civility and politeness for me, and he revealed that just as there are just and unjust laws, there are just and unjust social norms. He says that unjust laws do not square with the eternal moral law. They corrode human dignity, corrode human personality, he said. And I realize that the same is true for just and unjust social norms. That unjust social norms, they undermine undermine human dignity. They degrade human personality, such as social norms that say, you sit at the back of the bus, or you sit over there in that part of the restaurant. Like that's a norm that was degrading. Whereas just ones ennoble. They uplift human personality. They uplift human dignity. And that was really helpful for me, because that was the kind of moral basis, the why that I had hungered for my entire life when it came to civility. How do we differentiate between the norms we should keep versus the arbitrary norms that Judiths of a past era just decided should be the norm of the day? It's this litmus test that Dr. King offers us. Does it uplift human dignity and affirm human dignity and human personality, or does it degrade it? And if it degrades it, cast it aside. Let it be a relic of a bygone era, and let's revive and promote the pro-human social norms that facilitate social harmony and social relationships. And so these and many other wonderful insights from Dr. King, I came to at that Aspen Institute event. And it was a real privilege. And that was when I came home from work one day and said to my husband, I'm done with DC. I'm done with government. Like, let's move to Indiana. And he said, okay, sounds good. He's from Indiana originally. My husband's from just outside of Fort Wayne. If he were here, he'd tell you he grew up in a little tiny town called Harlan, Indiana, where he passed more Amish horse and buggies than cars on his way to school in the morning. And so we talked about, long talked about moving out here eventually to raise a family of our own and be close to his family. And so my husband says, okay, sounds good. Let's move to Indiana. No takebacks. And a few months later, we're out here, and it's been 6 years that we've been here. And I told the story last time about one of my first friends when I moved to Indiana. She came up to me after church one day and said, "Hi, I'm Joanna Taft. Would you like to porch with us sometime?" And I'd never heard the word porching used as a verb before. We were curious, and we went to her home that afternoon. And I realized that Joanna is staging a quiet revolution against our atomized, our divided, our uncivil status quo from the vantage point of her great big front veranda on her historic home downtown in the Heron Morton area of Indianapolis. She had curated people across race, across class, across geography, across politics, not to have curated conversations across difference, you say your bit, I say mine, but just to remind us this in a sacred and profound and simple way about our common humanity. We were people first in that moment. It was a seedbed of trust and respect and friendship across these differences that is so direly needed and so direly lacking in our world today. And I realized that, and I had the privilege of traveling across the country and meeting people like Joanna who are doing the same thing. They're saying, I can't control what's happening in DC, who's president, or what Elon Musk is doing on Twitter, or like what is going on in the world. Like or what's even happening, in Russia or the Middle East. Like, it's so easy to feel helpless, so much suffering, so much injustice, so much that we can't control. And people like Joanna are saying, I can't control what's happening, the injustices around the world, or what's going to happen in the future, but I can control myself. And I am going to make my community, my sphere of influence better and beautiful, my family better, beautiful, and stronger. And we can too, and in the small ways, that it's not even about the porch, it's about the disposition of civility. And with our daily words and actions, weaving, sowing seeds of trust and light and friendship and hospitality. And I have a whole chapter in my book on hospitality, because that's what Joanna was doing. She was showing hospitality in a real and practical way, going out of her way, seeing that we were new to the community, new to her church, and introducing herself and bringing us into her fold. And she said, we were on the hot seat for much of the time porching. Yet she asked us dozens of questions about who we were and what we were passionate about. And we left that day with like a dozen introductions in our inbox, where she connected us with different people in the community to help us make the community our own. I mean, there's a difference between a place that you live and a home, right? Indiana was a place that we lived. We had physically, geographically uprooted from DC and we had a home here. But it wasn't home until we had a community, a network of people that cared about us, that made us feel seen and known and loved. And we can each do that. A long time ago in a faraway place, there was a man named Eumaeus. And Eumaeus was a slave. He was someone who had nothing in the way of material and earthly possessions. And yet, one day, when Eumaeus saw someone who appeared to have even less than he did, what did Eumaeus do? He invited him into his home and said, "Let me feed you. Would you like a bath? Let me clothe you. Let me give you a place to stay." And only after he had done all of these wonderful things, met his immediate needs, made sure he was cared for, he said, "Now tell me your story, stranger." And Eumaeus was delighted and overjoyed when this old ragged beggar stood up, took off his coat, and it was his old long lost master Odysseus, who had been lost at sea for a decade after the Peloponnesian War, after the Trojan War. And this is a story given to us in Homer's Odyssey, this classic epic work written 2 millennia ago. And it's this beautiful depiction of hospitality and of civility, showing kindness to the stranger, the person that we may never see again, the person who can do nothing for us in return. That is ultimate, true civility and true hospitality. I call hospitality a high and noble expression of civility. And we can be physically hospitable. We can have people into our home. We can have, people. Too often today, hospitality is reduced to, luxury hotels and restaurants. And when you go to have a degree in hospitality, you're not learning about Eumaeus and Joanna Taft. You're learning about the mechanics of the restaurant industry, the hotel, the travel industry. But it's such a richer and more vibrant tradition than that I think we need to revive and revive today to help us bring seeds of light and hope in this deeply dark, divided time that we find ourselves in, because we each have way more power to be a part of the solution than we realize. Joanna's taught us that the countless people I've met across the country who are doing this now have taught, the Jeff Worrells of the world have taught me that. And you can too. And that's why I'm so thrilled you're here. It's a real privilege to be up here in Eagleton. Thank you for having me. And I can't wait to have the conversation tonight. So thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Lexi. Thank you. Thanks for getting us kicked off. So, are you good with us starting out with this document that Lexi has looked over, and maybe that will foster some dialogue as well? So has everybody had a chance to look over this document that I have called a code? Yeah, we've got lots more. Team, I need some more up here. Yeah. Well, it's actually changed, Matt. Yeah, this is all new, and you're going to understand why it's new since of my story I'm going to tell. Do you need one, Mark? Okay, yep. Okay. Everything just said. Anyone else?
I donated it.
Yep. I missed what you said, John. Oh, gotcha. Okay, all right. Okay, everybody have a copy so that we can, yeah, there we go. We need more, Beverly. So, I had this brilliant idea that being a politician and a candidate, that I would create, and we had candidates appear or that joined us at the last event. And so I said, well, let's create a civility pledge for all of our political candidates. And I was positive that everybody would, say, yeah, that's a great idea, Jeff. And, where do I sign? Well, guess what? Didn't go so well. Now, I will admit, and I'm not going to mention any names, I don't want to become a wedge, but there were some great people who were more than willing to sign it. So all is not lost. But there were others who were not, and I was fearful that tool could become a wedge, a tool to be used not for good, but for bad. And so I said, we're backing out. And then I went to a think group. What do you call your group again?
Just the discussion group.
discussion group. I remember John Mutz was there, former lieutenant governor, right? Right. Does everybody remember John Mutz? And he gave me very sage advice. This is not going to work, Jeff. And so, yes, sir, I will listen. So at that think tank, they said, why don't you do a document that is bottom up instead of top down, bottom up? What does the voter want? What are we looking for? What do we demand of our candidates? And then I will make my choice when I'm in the voting booth, whether or not I think you are civil. So I sent it to Lexi. She tweaked it. God bless you, Lexi. Because I wanted to at least bring you something that you could digest and say whether you agree or disagree with it. So I thought we might start out with, and I thought this might be fun. I'm just going to start out by saying, as a community, and please, even if someone can be against it, that'll make the discussion more fun. But if you can just give me a show of hands, how many of you think this document captures your understanding of civility and what we might try and achieve in Carmel? And if you want to weigh in, I don't know if do you need a copy of it? Just
That'd be great.
I need one more.
Oh, can you share? So,
assuming you've all had a chance to look at it, I'm going to ask for a show of hands. How many of you, I'm trying to think of the right way to word this, how many of you would, let's start with, would be proud to say, this is what Carmel expects from, it could be political candidates, could be our friends, could be our neighbors, could be our leaders, etc. And I did modify that one that even came in a little while ago. Yes. Okay. So, and let's just get the dialogue going.
Oh, well, I completely support this, and I might be a bit biased, but I am friends with Lexi, so I'm probably not the best person to start with if you're looking for contention. I attended the last meeting, loved it. I loved your son sending in a question. I thought, that was wonderful. I do have a question. So I love this, and I would like to know how I can help spread the word on this in our community and supporting this because of having civil discourse with others. And sometimes that is not possible. But I will say in my neighborhood, and I live right by here, I could walk here. We have multiple languages and nationalities in my neighborhood. And I love that. And I'd like to be able to convey that to others as part of my discourse. And I bake cookies and I do all kinds of stuff. And I don't know what we have fireworks going off at all kinds of times of other celebrations outside of our standards. So anyway, I would just like to know your thoughts on sharing this from a multicultural standpoint.
Well, I can ask that. I can tell you what my mother would do. And my mother and my grandmother, who is like my mother, an order of magnitude, just more of my mother. They're just both these superhuman connectors who just are passionate about the human social project and everything they do. And it's like kind of like Jeff Morrell, just like passionate about others and people. And just like wherever they go, they weave friendships and they sow trust and light and love in our social fabric. And so my mother is something of a polyglot. And so she collects languages. She collects, and so I think today she can greet people in 45 different languages. And so when a beautiful, tall, blonde woman walks up to you and you're the cultural minority in a place that is predominantly, white, and someone greets you in your native tongue, that's like music to your ears. Like it's lonely to come to a new place, even if you're not the cultural minority. It's lonely. Like you moved to New York City, and this is what we all fundamentally want in life: is to be seen and known and loved for the fullness of who we are. I think that's like our deepest fear is that people see us for who we are, and they reject us. They think that we're not enough. And that my mom has just I've seen countless people, their face, their whole person just illuminate within a moment of her greeting them, kumusta ka in Tagalog, the language they did. And sometimes still does a guess like what language someone speaks, which isn't very politically correct, right? You're not supposed to see race these days. You're not supposed to see cultural, ethnic differences, but it just delights them. It just overwhelmingly delights. Like, it's a risk that she takes that, to be politically incorrect. But it's for the sake of community. It's for the sake of friendship. And she just delights in that. So, bake them cookies and then have them bring you food as well. Like that food is like a really beautiful bridge builder, and have these conversations. I think that's a really beautiful, sentiment, Kara. Thank you.
Yeah. And hospitality.
Yes, exactly.
So I'll tell you what I'm going to do, and you will be next, sir. The online, we have quite a few people online, so they've asked me to read this. So will you humor me? I'm going to go really fast. But as Carmel voters, we are committed to fostering an environment of civility where every individual is treated with respect and dignity. As such, we urge all candidates running for public office in Carmel to uphold these principles when engaging with voters, and expect candidates to adhere to the following basic tenets of civility. Number one, civility and respect. Candidates must demonstrate a respectful attitude towards everyone, regardless of differences, and encourage open-minded dialogue. Number two, integrity and truthfulness. Candidates are expected to maintain truth and transparency in their campaign communications and actions, promptly addressing any errors that may occur. Positive focus is number three. Campaigns should focus on the candidate's vision and policies, refraining from attacks on opponents' character using incomplete or inaccurate information about their record. Is that one okay? I changed it. Informed discourse. Candidates should provide accurate information about their platform and engage in constructive discussions to promote understanding and informed voting. And then number five, democratic process and accountability. Candidates are required to respect the democratic process, accept outcomes, and encourage their supporters to participate in campaigns with integrity and decency in support of these principles. Signed, Carmel, Indiana. Let's start out with a show of hands. How many of you would support this document? And it is absolutely okay to not. So would you please give me a show of hands? Okay, a little over half maybe. Okay. Now, how many of you think this document is not correct, doesn't go far enough, goes too far? And I'm certainly open to hearing that as making this a little bit of a work session. Yes, sir. I'm coming back there with the microphone. There you go.
Hey, I'm Chet Karpinski, and I appreciate everybody's work on this. Really good start. Appreciate it, Jeff, and others that are involved. So I'll get the discourse going here. I'm a little confused with the document. I read there's about 200 words here, excluding the headers, and I only see Carmel in it twice. Okay, so I think the call out should be in each of these, it should be a reference back to Carmel. So a political candidate can have a platform, which is great, but I want to know how it relates to Carmel. Okay, I don't want to know how it relates to their view of the world or their view of the United States. I want to see what they're going to do for Carmel. So this is great. I didn't raise my hand, not because I wasn't supportive, but I think it needs some refinement. And for example, let me find the informed discourse. No positive focus. Should focus on the Canada's vision and policies as they relate to Carmel. Okay, if they want to talk about the state, then they should go run for state government or federal government. Now, I know there's a nexus, so, I'm not that naive, but that's why we vote for people in Carmel, so they can make the place safe, well efficient, welcoming, and all those things. So I think it needs a little work. Great start, so I appreciate all the effort.
Good feedback. All right, good feedback. Anyone else? Yes, I'm going to come right up there. Does anyone remember that Phil Donahue guy? I've always wanted to be that guy.
I don't think this document is balanced. I don't feel like civility is strictly a candidate's responsibility. I think it's all of our responsibility as citizens of whether it's Carmel or anywhere. I'll write it down, but yes.
That's an interesting point, because it kind of inverts what this is. Like, maybe we need this is like for this is like a one aspect, an addendum, an appendix to it, but it's like Carmel Citizens Civility Pledge, and there's just one aspect of it about the accountability, what we expect from leaders, but it's more about, the day-to-day questions like what Kara was asking about, and about, how are we going to act towards our fellow citizens in the ways big, but also small in our everyday. I think it's a really interesting question.
Yeah. Okay, good feedback.
I based anyone involved process for the ones.
I did read it as being a bilateral document where it talks about engagement and dialogue. Well, you can't do that with one person. So I thought it was all of us.
Anyone else want to comment on this?
Hi, my name's Carlos. I love it, but the one thing I loved the most was the bottom-up aspect that you are trying to emphasize. The top-down effect, I agree. That was, putting it on them. I say you're exactly right. So there's ways that we could improve that, in my opinion, for the document. So, like in the header, it says, "We urge all candidates running." Let's not put it on them so much as putting it on us that we expect all candidates running to be this way. And it says that in the very last part of that header. We expect candidates to adhere. But I really think each and every point, all 5 of them, should say, we as Carmel voters expect this. And that really emphasizes your point that it's bottom up.
This is it.
I'm not a citizen of Carmel, Sheridan, but this is just an observation. In your book, you talk about the definition of civilization and how we look at civilization typically, what are their buildings like? What are their opportunities like? What are, the level of quality of their life? But maybe a better way to look at civilization is how civilized they are and how civil they are with each other. And Carmel is a wonderful place, and it's number one in so many things. But wouldn't it be wonderful to be number one in civility?
And a particular aspect of that definition of civilization, of true civilization versus faux civilization. Faux civilization is, how sophisticated is our language? How beautiful are our skyscrapers? And it's grounded in these superficial aspects of civilization. But what I define as true civilization is how does the cultural minority treat the cultural minority? How does the in-group treat the out-group? How do we treat the least of these, the people who are powerless, who can do nothing for us in return? Samuel Johnson, the gentleman who wrote the English dictionary in 1755, he says, a true test of civilization is how they treat the poor and vulnerable in a society. So exactly to getting back to what Kara was saying.
Yeah. And on that, and on that topic, do you reference, I can't remember if I read this in your book or if I read it outside, but the professor who talked about the sign of a civilization when they saw a broken femur that had been mended because someone helped that other human to heal, because otherwise they would have died.
Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
I just wanted to respond to the gentleman with the Carmel view. I read it with a broader view of my candidates. So that's probably where I come from. That as a Carmel citizen, I'm looking at the legislature, I'm looking at my Congress, I'm looking at the president. So as a Carmel citizen, that's the point of view I have, that I want all my candidates to have this civil point of view.
Thank you. Got to go over here and I'll be back.
Yeah, so this is a really great document, and I really like the idea of it, but I was thinking about the practicality of what's going to happen to me as a voter in the booth. So I want to make civility my number one issue, but there's going to be policies that I care about. And since I only have 2 choices, Republican or Democrat, I'm kind of stuck. Even if the person may not be civil, I may have to vote for the person's policies I want. So I don't have a system that I can make this decision. practically. I want to. This is an important issue to me, but we're not in a system where we can.
That is a great point. And of course, the candidates, being one, I can speak to this, the candidates are going to choose how they conduct their campaign. And I guess what I'm trying to do is to say that from the ground up, there are more people than ever have been thinking about civility. And some of the stuff that ended up in our mailboxes this year are not acceptable. And I won't go any further, but that we're thinking about it. But certainly, if someone wants to raise taxes and someone wants to lower taxes, that's your call, how you vote for them. But what is ending up in our mailboxes? What are we seeing on TV? What's being said? And then done after the election occurs. So you are correct. This is a little bit, and I should give you a chance to speak, but this is a little bit, we have to start, well, my theory is we have to start somewhere. Do you have a comment on that?
No. But
Okay.
do you want to answer?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, we're going to do one more online. Sorry. We've got an online one.
Oh, okay. So this says, do you believe that leaders who don't model civility values are giving permission to their followers to do the same? And that's a really interesting question. This is a question that
Everybody get that?
Yeah. It's kind of this chicken and the egg question of that people have been reflecting on for a very long time. Who is responsible? Is it the voters who's responsible for supporting a leader, or is it the leader that ennobles or fosters ignoble spirit in the people? Like who has greater responsibility there? And in a democracy, it's really both. And at different points throughout intellectual history, people who wanted to reform society did reform leaders for this exact reason. I particularly love the Italian Renaissance. That's an area of intellectual history I'm endlessly fascinated in, this like proliferation of human flourishing and output of human potential in art and architecture and literature and poetry, and in politics. It was this like hearkening back to the wisdom of antiquity, to classical, and reviving the best of the past, melding it with the needs of the present. And one thing they were really interested in was virtue, and how do we cultivate good character and good virtue in leaders and citizens. And so a lot of the people who were part of the Renaissance intentionally sought out roles as being advisors and educators and tutors to princes, because the idea was that is how you change society. You cultivate the character and souls of future leaders, people who have influence, who have the ear of the people, because people emulate those who are in positions of authority. And so that's not the be all end all. That is just one piece of the coin. We have way more agency, way more power than we realize. This is the undercurrent in my message and Jeff's message throughout my book. And this is the premise of a democracy, that the citizen is prior to the leader and to the institution, to the state. And we put our leaders there, and we have the power to kick them out as well. And so this is exactly why, things like this are so powerful that, so all that to answer our question, we're not off the hook, even if there are bad leaders out there who are, emboldening the baser nature of their followers and just people in society at large, breaking norms and breaking, in a way that normalizes bad conduct. That does not let us off the hook. And that's why initiatives like this are so important.
I look at this document and think we need two documents. We need a document for citizens of Carmel, and we need a document for candidates. I was a candidate last year, and I held myself to high standards because I believe that people who seek to lead us should hold themselves to higher standards than the average man in the street. So I would support, I think this is great for candidates, but I think there's a broader document for how people just interact on a normal day in a normal place. I think there's two specific needs.
I think you just signed up for the leadership team. Okay. Let's see. I've got to get over here because I'm trying to be fair here. All right, sir.
Thank you, Phil. I followed up on all these comments. It starts out saying, as Carmel voters, we are committed. I think we had to personalize more and say, as a Carmel voter, I am committed, and then place down here to sign our name.
Really quickly, Jeff, we'd love to stay in touch with all of you. Thanks to those of you who signed in on your way in. And if you haven't, we'd love to stay in touch. And I have several free gifts to send you in your inbox. One is a toolkit called How to Talk with Anyone About Anything. And another is a Greek mythology in 10 minutes mini course, kind of a crash course in the great conversation. So we'll pass this around, and it's a way to stay in touch with us and also about future initiatives as well. So please share.
Go.
Hello. My name is Bree. I know a couple of you here, and I was here actually the last time Lexi spoke at the library. I really like this, and I want to be a part of Carmel. I'm a millennial. I wish I saw younger faces here, quite honestly. I'm really bummed about that, and I'm hoping that we can begin to gear up our every age around this. So put me in, coach, because I want to be able to do that.
Period. Okay. Who is somebody over? Oh, I'm sorry. There you go. Yeah. And I do want to also give time for if anyone came with a burning question too. So
What kind of
a burning question?
Oh.
Something not too late to discuss.
Okay. My issue to the gentleman who said that we should identify Carmel people in our civility, I agree with that, and I respect your opinion for that. But civility is not a one-person deal. Civility is inclusive. It's not exclusive. And what our responsibility, as I see it, is to be able to introduce civility to people that might not even know how to do that. And we do that by example, not by where we live or who we are or what we have. It is by example. And I think if we start with our children, being civil to our children, we're including them in the world that we want them to live in.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. We'll do one more on the document. And then I'm going to just see if anybody has any questions, because I know I've got one about
Yeah. Hello. I think the document is great, for one. But based on my own experiences, she brought up a great point. When I was a child, I was looking to my parents to model civility to me. They were looking for me as a child, I guess, to be an example of that civility so that they could So we were both, I grew up in a household where we were both wanting from one another what neither one of us were getting from one another. And as a parent now, I know that it is my duty and my responsibility, being the person who, I think we all desire a shared sense, not a shared community always, but a shared sense of connection and unity and purpose with one another. And I think in the political divide, you've got a lot of times Republicans finding that shared sense of connection, unity, and purpose with one another. Democrats are finding that shared sense of connection, unity, and purpose with one another. And what we that desire civility over politics are looking for is, how do we get others to create that environment and culture of civility as leaders so that we can experience it as citizens. And but the truth is, the way your mom, like when she would meet somebody and she would know how to provide a common sense of connection and unity in purpose with somebody who felt so alone, it would change the atmosphere. And I think that if we are looking at how can we each, it would be awesome if every leader bought into this, but I do think that if, as the voter, if we will exemplify that, even to those who maybe we don't think deserve it, like we deserve to receive that example from, if we will just continue to be that example and hold those that make that commitment with us accountable and together grow to that example, I think, we might become leaders one day, or it might change the hearts of leaders, and we kind of turn it from the inside out.
Very good. Very good. Excellent. Okay. Okay, thank you. So did anyone come with a question for Lexi? This most likely is the last time we'll have Lexi with us for a while. So I want to make sure that everybody gets their question.
Thank you. Stay up so I can see you. Hi, my name's Josh. So I'm actually also running for office. I'm a candidate, right? And for me, I'm going to stay civil because I have kids, right? And they're going to mimic my behavior. So if I go out there and I'm uncivil, they're going to think that's okay, right? But my guess is that since most of us are in this room, we agree with the idea of being civil. In your writing and in your study, have you kind of found maybe a reason behind why the people that are being uncivil, it's actually so popular? Because we've seen a lot of politicians be rewarded very richly, not just monetarily, I mean by votes. By the nastier they get, this more seems to benefit them. And do you see that there's some sort of root cause to that? Because I think maybe, like I said, if we're all in here, we're wanting to be more civil. So maybe we're also missing what's causing that, uncivilness. Actually, is it discivil or uncivil? I'm telling
Uncivil, yeah.
Mike.
Yeah. Raise your hand if you've heard of Albert J. Nock. Has anyone in this room heard of Albert J. Nock? He was a turn of the century kind of public intellectual in America, but he has this famous essay called Isaiah's Job. And Isaiah was a prophet from the Hebrew Bible, and he gave, and what a prophet does is they go and give news that isn't always well received, and he says that the job of a prophet is the job of like a leader, a true leader, a public intellectual as well, is to say your truth and act with integrity, act according to your own values in a way that makes you proud and helps you sleep at night. And you might be preaching to a remnant, just as a remnant, meaning just a few contingent in your audience. And it's going to fall on deaf ears to most people, and it's not going to matter because rage is seductive. And being told that you're a victim is seductive, and being told that it's not your fault and it's the bad guys and I'm going to get the bad guys for you. I'm a bully, but I'm your bully. That's seductive. And it always has been so. It always has been. It's like just part of the human condition. And so I say, to people like you who say, am I at a handicap because I'm not willing to do and say certain things that my opponents might be, because I want to be a good example to my kids, which is the highest motivation. That people who are willing to go low and hurt others don't just hurt others. This is actually a key insight that I got from this close rereading of Dr. King's letter from Birmingham jail that I engaged in at my retreat with the Aspen Institute. He makes a similar argument about segregation. And Dr. King's borrowing from Socrates, the Greek philosopher. Socrates said, virtue is health of the soul. If you act with integrity and virtue, that is a symptom of a health. If you act towards justice towards others, that's a symptom of a healthy soul. And Socrates says, vice is its own punishment. When you are vicious, and a symptom of a vicious soul is injustice. Acting with injustice and discourteousness and degrading the dignity and humanity of others, that is its own punishment. It's because it's even if someone walks around with impunity and they win the elections, they win all the gold stars, even though they were vicious and unjust, that is a symptom of an unhealthy soul. And an unhealthy soul, even if they don't realize it, is its own punishment. And Dr. King, borrows from this tradition. He loved Socrates and loved Plato, and he said the same thing. He makes a similar point about segregation in the letter from Birmingham jail. He says that segregation doesn't just hurt the segregated; it hurts the segregator as well. It hurts the segregated, obviously, by giving them a false sense of inferiority. It degrades them. It corrodes their dignity and personhood by making them feel inferior. But it gives the segregator a false sense of inferiority, and that deforms their soul. And there was actually, really interestingly, a whole debate, and that's its own punishment. And so it hurts both parties. And the reality is that acts of incivility, this applies to civility and incivility as well, that acting with decency and courtesy and justice is its own reward. Whereas discourteousness and, encouraging vitriol and ad hominem attacks, that is its own punishment.
Very good. Is there another question? Yes. And then I have to make sure we get compromise on the topic. Go ahead.
Well, that lends right into this then. Because we had talked previously, I'm going to ask my question against the backdrop of where I think we are politically, since this started out as we as voters. So that puts us in a political decision mind frame. When I was an 18-year-old voter, the differences between the two major political parties were relatively minor. They were methodical. What is the best method to achieve this versus this method? Now, I think we have such a huge amount of incivility because the spectrum is so wide, the divide is so wide, the philosophy is so wide. People don't understand the meaning of the terms. They don't understand what capitalism is. They don't understand what the definition is. They don't understand what socialism is, what the definition is. So we have a lot of people using words that they don't understand, and they use them to their own benefit and to their own political advantage. I won't necessarily say philosophical advantage. So that's the backdrop for my question. When you spoke the first time, you talked about differentiating civility with politeness.
Mm-hmm.
I would like you to differentiate civility against ethics, morality, and personal integrity.
Mm-hmm. And finally, well, if you don't have a copy of the book yet, please do take one home. I have a whole chapter on integrity for that exact reason. That integrity. Yeah, the integrity is all parts of the self, like making sense together. And you know, there's a relation between etiquette and ethics. Like our social norms are often, they are revelatory of our core values. The French sociologist named Pierre Bourdieu, he said that you can read a whole cosmology into the manners of a people. Like you get their whole worldview, their Weltanschauung, as the Germans would say, by just observing their social norms and what they value as a society. And there's a relationship between manners and morals as well. It's not a perfect relationship, as I explore throughout that book. As I've experienced, and I'm sure many of you have experienced, like, you know, the Bond villain, for example. The epitome, or, you know, Hannibal Lecter, the Hannibal Lecter effect, right? The epitome of suave and refined and well-educated, excellent taste, you know, listening to Bach with hand sketches of Florence behind them while flaying someone alive, right? Like, and it's interesting, Ian Fleming in his Bond novels, he unpacks this idea between inner and outer conduct and inner morality, through and he embodies this dialogue in his Bond villains that, again, are often polished and suave, but they have a slight defect often, like a deformed ear or some sort of like so physical deformity that does mirror and reveal the deformity of their character and soul, like that they're planning world domination and willing to hurt millions of innocent people. And so there is often a tight relationship that manners and etiquette can be revelatory of manners and morals. But, you know, as we know, it's not a perfect match. And what my whole argument in the book in differentiating between civility and politeness is to say we shouldn't settle and be content with politeness and compliance with rules and etiquette alone. Like that we should instead not just focus on what we see and how people seem, but let's look behind who they actually are, the character. And, you know, character is habit long continued. It's like, are you the same person? Are you showing up time and time and time again the same way? And that as a society, we should instead focus on character, on looking at not just what people do and say, but the motivation behind it. Like, has anyone heard of Émile Durkheim before? Émile Durkheim, French sociologist. He wrote a famous book called Suicide. And he was reflecting on the suicide epidemic in France in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And he said, what is going on here? Like, this is a society in clear despair. Why? And in his book on suicide, he talks about this crisis of what he calls anomie, the sense of utter normlessness in a society where people just didn't know what the norms were, what was expected of them. There's power to social norms, just knowing what to expect in your interactions with others and knowing what's expected of you. And there were many changes in France during this time, like as the Industrial Revolution, people were moving off of, out of small towns and off farms and into big societies and cities. And there were just other like big social, economic changes going on that made people feel this like crisis of just normlessness that put them into a sense of utter despair. And unfortunately, we have this sense of normlessness now as well. It's a core part of our justice system. What makes our justice system just, one part of the rule of law, is knowing in advance what the law is. And in our justice system today, we treat differently whether you mens rea versus actus reus. Did you knowingly break a law or was it an accident? And we treat that differently, as you should. But today, often people are walking on eggshells and they don't know when they're going to have their head bitten off and when they're going to be canceled and publicly shamed. They don't know what sense of justice tends to spin on the mercurial preferences of the person they're talking to or someone online, right? Like one person online is offended by what you said, that it becomes this Twitter sensation that gets you fired from your job, right? We're in this crisis of loneliness, yes, but also normlessness now that is not conducive to human flourishing or justice. And I mention that because we should care less about what people do and just whether they're following the right rules of propriety and etiquette, and more care about who they are and what was the motivation behind the act as well. That's the argument I make about civility being more important. We should focus on that over mere politeness.
So, Lexi, to close this out, what are some things that this group can do to foster civility with our neighbors, our family, our coworkers, any of the people that we come in contact with the rest of this month? And if it's don't get involved in a March Madness pool, I get it. Okay, but now what's something that we can do? What are some take homes?
Well, first of all, please stay in touch with us. Thanks to those of you who have filled out the spreadsheet. Can you raise your hand if the spreadsheet is somewhere?
It's still going around.
Still going around. Awesome. Yeah. And please make sure you don't leave yet without saying goodbye to both Jeff and I and without signing up so we can stay in touch with you and stay engaged in this conversation. So thanks for that. But the thing you can do, first thing tomorrow is, first of all, get to know your neighbor, new neighbor, old neighbor you just haven't gotten to know very well. Knock on the door, introduce yourself. And it's important. It's important, for transcendent reasons, but also practical reasons. Jane Jacobs, who was this, keen observer of human nature and of kind of city planning, she calls it eyes on the street, that it's important to just have a community where you know that you're cared for. And, you go to town, they care for you. They're watching out for you.
Lexi, let me just stop you there. That is such a power. So I run into people all the time who have, a situation in their neighborhood. I said, well, have you talked to well, I don't know my neighbor. That is huge. Porching is big, but could we all pick a neighbor somewhere and just, I don't know, stick an envelope in their door, knock on the door if you're brave enough and say, I don't think we've ever met. Would that be just a huge step forward?
It's small, but really powerful. And I'll tell you why it's hard. I'll tell you why we don't do this. Like the body, the mind, we interpret social rejection in the same way as physical pain. And we're deeply, deeply afraid of being rejected, of making a bid, even a tiny one, and having that rebuffed. Like showing up to someone and not having them show up in the same way, that's hurtful. And that is so hard, even though it's so small. Like our body, our brain literally interprets that as physical pain. And we avoid that. And how do we avoid that? By not putting ourselves out there. It's not taking the uncomfortable step and being out of our comfort zone and putting ourselves in a state of vulnerability where someone might not reciprocate and might say, no thanks, I don't really want to know you. That there's always that chance of that. And yet there is tons of research, and we know this to be true. I know this from watching my mother and grandmother just operate in the world and just lighting up countless lives, like that people are way more receptive to our bids of affection than we ever will realize or imagine. They're way more open to it. A new friend, just a tiny little bit, and we and even if they don't show up the same way, they're not as enthusiastic as maybe we are. What my mother or grandmother would do, they would tell these stories of exoneration, stories that exonerate the other and not stories of condemnation, not they're a bad person, they're a grouch, they're a Grinch, you know. There are many stories that you could tell, right? They're a racist, they're a Republican, they're a Democrat, like that explains it, right? But just to say, you know, they're having a bad day. Or what about, you know, maybe they have a terminally ill child, and telling a story that, you know, that exonerates them and doesn't define them by that moment. And then maybe even try again, even though that might be really hard. But there's great power in the small things. And in fact, this is an argument in my book. Our democracy depends on the small things, depends on knowing your neighbors. And so it's hard, and that's why it's hard, but we have to keep trying.
You just gave me my next column in the Current. So, okay. All right. This has been great. I want to be I would keep Lexi here all night if I could, but we have a couple of things to do. If I could just have your attention. Beverly, would you please come forward? We just have a little gift for you. So, you know, Lexi said yes when some crazy person calls her from Carmel, Indiana, and she said yes. And she has kids and a family and a life and traveling, book tour and everything. So we just would like to present you with just a small token of our appreciation. And I want to just read, or maybe you can read it. No, that's probably not cool. So with gratitude to Alexandra Hudson for her support in launching the Carmel Civility Project. Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
Right.
Thank you. Sure.
I'm super curious about, and this is something you don't have to answer yet, but the gamification of communities across the country, not just between us and Fishers, with who can be more civil, because there's a lot of rivalry going on, and I would like to know how that's going to be gamified.
Yeah.
Yeah. Quantify. Who can sell the most books?
That's
Let's
right.
do it.
Okay, all right. Oh, spoken like a true author. There we go. That away. I love that. I need your help, though, because I don't want to have to buy Fisher's dinner or something. Okay, so are all of you getting the emails and that we're sending out and the communications that we're trying to send out? Well, I think we're going to be more perfect in the future as we have Beverly helping and who is dynamite at this stuff. But if you are not if you've not received an email or any communication from me, make sure you sign up for either Lexi's list or the other, whichever clipboard is going around, because we're going to share. So, okay. Did you feel like you received what you came here for tonight? Is everybody comfortable? And certainly we can stay, but I thought I maybe sensed a little bit that we were getting to our end. And if you did not receive what you came here for, will you please send me an email? Be brutal. I can take it. But please send me an email so that we know how to keep this alive. And yes. But be civil when you send me that brutal email, okay? Thank you. Oh, we're learning, aren't we? Okay. And there's so much positive going on. Now, Lexi, you're going to be in the back. You're willing to sign books. If anyone brought a book or you want to purchase a book, the Carmel Library, and the proceeds are going to the Carmel Library Foundation. That's how we set this all up. So don't buy it on Amazon. Am I allowed to say that? Yes, buy it from the Carmel Library, please. Okay.
But do review it if you've read it and enjoyed it, or just if you've got a chapter in and that's all you have time for. Please do review it. That's
great
really
book.
helpful.
It's great book. And then one last shout out, and I'll take if someone needs something else. Indie Business Promotions, they did our live stream tonight. It was amazing. I got a couple of looks. Amazing. Give them a big shout out. And we will then take their work and we will post it on several sources so that you can see, because you had a couple of topics here that I want to get deeper into, but that will be available to you. Will you please continue to mention civility as you see uncivil behavior? I'm seeing it on Facebook. I'm seeing it on social media. I love that. Will you please help us grow and nurture a better community by being civil? So thank you. Do you have any parting words, or you're good? Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone.
And I thought I saw someone with a hand up. Yes.
March 20.
Oh, thank you. You got to go on the road with me. All right. March 21st, we're doing the focus group. I will send you information, be very probably 1 hour sessions. I'm going to have multiple sessions with a professional facilitator. Won't be me. So we will do that. And it's going to be at the Carmel Library. Details to follow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Toby Malachi, your book's excellent. I'm in awe that you had Dr. King and Rosa Parks. Because of your session back in January, I've had 3 podcasts from you all in the office right here today, Practice Civility. 3 podcasts from the group right here. I'm going to speak to Lions Club, or excuse me, the Rory's Club on April 19th because of you and your book. The people really treated me here. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Hey, that'll great. That's awesome. That's great. We got to keep this rolling. And how many of you was this the first time in the Village West Clay? Jeff Turp wants. Okay. All right. See, isn't this cool? We got to. So us East Siders got to come over here more often. This is awesome. Okay, everybody. God bless. Make sure you are talking about civility, and Lexi will be in the back. Thank you for coming.
Lexi, you still at the cleric's house? Yeah. Facts.